All right. I'm Adam Willems, lead reporter at the FR.
Hi, I'm Jessica Turner, and I am the Global Head of Open Banking and API at Mastercard.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So first, I'm curious, sort of. Uh, well, okay. So you work in open banking, to say the obvious, but I'm curious where you actually see open banking developing and how you see it unfolding in the United States, because it's sort of been in the cards from a regulatory perspective for quite a while.
It's a great question. So, open banking in the United States has been around for a little bit, but in different use cases.
Mm-hmm.
One is account opening. So if you're opening a digital account, a lot of times when you're connecting your bank account, you're actually using open banking to do that with your consent.
Mm-hmm.
Other use cases are really around using your bank account information to do things like verify a lending protocol. So if you're getting a mortgage, for example,
Mm-hmm.
they verify everything. And you
Right.
can do that through open banking by connecting. And so those have been some use cases you've seen in the
Mm-hmm.
US. Now, saying that, there's many more, and there's so much more that can be done. And we really are in a nascent place today. However, I do think with some of the shifts in the industry, some of the commercial needs, even with the digitization of everybody because of the past years, you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
a bigger demand for that data to be sent to third parties,
Right.
whether it's for a better experience, a better product.
Right.
And then most recently, 1033 came out, which has
Right.
provided some guidance. So I think it's going to start to really blossom into more use cases, bigger innovations, even in the world of payments.
Right. What's interesting about open banking in the United States compared to Europe is that there are these sort of open banking use cases, but they aren't necessarily named explicitly as open banking. There isn't that same sort of consumer awareness or even fintech awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious sort of how that impacts your work.
That's a great question. So it's very true. In Europe, they have two different types of data streams. They're called PIS and AIS, and people know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you work with fintechs, you talk about it. Here, a lot of times we're just talking about the access and openness to data with
Mm-hmm.
data principles, with consumer or small business consent. But people aren't calling it open banking. You're exactly right. What they're trying to do is solve a problem, create a new product, develop something new that
Right.
sits on top of this data stream. So for our business, what that means is we spend a lot of time in solutioning. How can we help you? What can we
Mm-hmm.
do? What are you solving for? How does the data work? And how do you do it in a way that's compliant, legal,
Right.
and meets all the regulation?
Right.
Legal is usually important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Someone would call it a prerequisite.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what are sort of the most acute use cases that you're looking to solve as Mastercard within the open banking space?
It's a great question. So we focus really on four, and one's not so much a use case.
Okay.
One is account opening, and the reason I say that is because every day fraudsters show up, they learn new things. And so we're laser locked on how do we get all the way through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our open banking asset, which allows with consent for us to check and verify that you're actually connecting to your account. Important.
Right.
And then what you're doing has money and funding, which helps reduce fraud. But on the front end of that is also a digital identity component.
Okay.
Are you who you say you are?
Right.
And then there's multiple steps to do that. So we're really focused on bringing all these different assets together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no fraud in digital account opening. It's pretty important, and it works across all types of businesses. Another is payments. Mastercard's a big believer in payment choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can use open banking to move different payments, whether that's real-time payments, ACH payments, help verify and add value even to existing card payments.
Sure.
A third is what I would call helping lenders.
Mm-hmm.
Huge component of what we do, big part of inclusion. And we're big proponents of breaking the digital divide. With consumer consent, if you're credit invisible
Mm-hmm.
and you have no credit score, you can provide information to a lender who can then underwrite you and provide you some type of loan or a way to get capital where you weren't able to do that before.
Right.
And so that's a huge chunk of our business. It's one of the core reasons we acquired Finicity 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we believe that will expand globally and meets our inclusion metrics. The fourth is small business, which isn't a use case, but it's a market that should be using all of those things,
Right.
especially the one around access to data so that they can get more capital.
Okay, understood. You mentioned an acquisition of Finicity.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that and the thought process behind that acquisition. And from there, also, I'm curious, just across sort of the open banking spectrum, how much of these sort of solutions are ones that you're building out in-house versus something that you partner with a fintech for or something like that?
It's a great question. So the reason we acquired Finicity after looking at many different ways to do things is the connectivity for open banking in the US, because it hasn't been standardized or regulated, has taken many, many, many years to get it right and to do direct connections. And they had been around doing it for a long time. And they were doing it for mortgage reports, which meant we knew that they were bank friendly and that they knew how to be compliant, be regulated properly. There's something called a CRA. It's a credit risk agency status.
Okay.
Not super easy to get. Finicity had that. We believed that was going to be very important for us to continue to expand in the landscapes with big enterprise players. And so that's why we acquired that versus building it. They had the expertise.
Right.
Then what we did is we added on a lot of these use cases and then started to work with fintechs for more value-added services.
Okay.
And so we still do that today. We have a Start Path, which is a fintech accelerator program purely for open banking.
Okay.
Just focused on what fintechs can we work with in the open banking space that either want to use the data and are creating great things that we can help them distribute to our customer base, or assets that we can embed into our own and make a product that we move forward with. So that's how we work together. I mean, we're a big believer that fintechs drive innovation. Yeah. Huge believer. And we actually bought a fintech in Copenhagen, a small acquisition, much smaller than Finicity, rather than building it as well.
Okay, interesting. Something like Fintech Meetup then, is that a space for you to meet potential accelerated participants and things like that? Or what's sort of the value that you get out of a space like this?
Absolutely why I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here for 3 reasons. One is to learn and hear what people are looking for, what they're doing, what these fintechs want and need, so we can make sure that our product roadmap is fulfilling their needs. 2 is to find different companies that we can work with, either in our Start Path program or directly with our product set. And there's been many here, many that are either current customers or partners, and then new ones. And then the third reason is to see how others and I don't want to say competitors, but others in the space are looking and doing things differently than maybe we are, because I do believe open banking is one area that all boats can rise. Banks can win, fintechs can win, end users can win, and there's a lot of space to play. And so trying to understand what people in the same space that I'm in are doing is helpful to bring the industry forward.
Totally. Yeah. 2 questions left.
Sure.
One is, where do you see MasterCard and open banking a year from now? Sort of specifically at that nexus. You don't need to speak for the entire corporation.
Yeah. So for open banking, a year from now, I expect us to have greater scale. I expect us to continue to do things that drive the entire ecosystem. So I'll give you just one quick example. Last week, we made an announcement that we're using open banking data, and we're making it a core benefit to MasterCard's debit cards. And what we're doing is we're saying, if you have a MasterCard, if you're offering a bank account with a MasterCard debit card, you can use our open banking data to help you more securely open that debit card and that bank account as a core benefit of the card. So that's helpful to our banks and our FIs and our fintechs that issue cards in a different way. I see us doing more things like that. Really figuring out, like, how do we take this open data consented by consumers and just helping the entire ecosystem so that everybody wins with that same data set, and scaling that across the US, and then continuing our global expansion, because we're throughout Europe as well as Australia today.
Really interesting. So the open banking component is active in Europe and Australia as well.
That's right.
Not just the United States. Okay. Fascinating. My last question is whether there are any questions I haven't asked that you feel like I should have.
That's a hard question.
Here we are.
Here's what I would say. I think the one thing I would say, and I don't even know if it would be a question, but people often ask me, why hasn't open banking moved faster than people expected it to take off much more quickly than it has to date? And I think the real reason for that is because the ecosystem has to come along for everyone to benefit. So that's why I bring up all boats rise. And I think we're at a cornerstone now with 1033, with people doing things differently. Some segments, banks understand the implications. Big aggregators and third-party receivers do, but many fintechs don't yet. And so I think educating everyone on what this means for the industry in the US will help it scale and have the trajectory people were expecting, because that has been the one downfall, is that it is an ecosystem play. Everybody has to come along together, and I think we're finally at a crossroads.
Great.
that.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was really nice to meet you.